snack. Me and you gonna have a little chat about books. Hi guys, so today I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. I always get people asking me if I can recommend some fantasy books to them, because obviously I do read a lot of fantasy, and of course I can recommend you guys some fantasy books. I thought I would make a video about it because so many of you are always asking me what I would recommend, and I thought I'll get the top 10 fantasy series that I've read and I will let you guys know about them. So yeah, let's just get started. I'll give you a really brief synopsis of each of them and then you guys can choose for yourselves what you want to actually read. So these are my top 10 at the moment. Obviously I haven't read all that much fantasy, high fantasy, and there are loads more books and loads more authors out there who I really still want to try. So as always, leave your recommendations for me down below. If you think I would like something, then definitely let me know, because then I can do reviews and let you guys know what I thought of it. So it works in a wonderful circle, and thank you guys for asking for this, so let's just get started. So the first book that I have to talk to you guys about is a pretty obvious one because I have recently been raving about this, and that is The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. As many of you know, Brandon Sanderson is one of my favourite authors and I would highly recommend any of his books to you. I do actually have 3 of his series in this collection, so yeah, you'll realise that I really like him. This series is basically a huge series. The book is absolutely giant and the series is going to be 10 books long as far as I know. This is called Way of Kings. It is book 1 in the Stormlight Archive. It is a really epic fantasy story. It's set in the world of Roshar, which is a huge world. There's so many different things that go on and such a huge world. It's all very cleverly interwoven together, and the whole story is just very entertaining, highly enjoyable. The magical powers which are talked about within this series are very cool, very different to everything I've heard of before. There is magical armour that you can summon and it is very powerful, very interesting. There are huge great crab-like creatures and all sorts of really interesting creatures and animals which we have never heard of before and are very unique and interesting. There are these things called spren, which are basically little spirits which appear around all sorts of different things. You can get water spren, you can get fear spren, you can get them all around kind of elements or emotions, and you get spren for basically everything, and they're really interesting. They play a big part in this series. And then we have our main characters. We have Kaladin and we have Shallan. Kaladin is a fighter, he's a survivor and he's a leader. And then we have Shallan, who is a fairly young girl. She's not entirely sure what she wants to do with her life, but throughout the course of this and book 2 she really starts to realise. And they're not exactly epic adventurers like a lot of fantasy stories have. They're actually very unique and individual, which I really enjoyed. They're not these big heroes just yet, but they grow into their roles as it goes on. It is a really good book and I would definitely recommend this. But obviously it's over 1,000 pages for this one and the second one in the series, so it is quite a commitment. And if you want to try something a little bit less big and huge than this, then look at the other Sanderson books that I've got in this video and maybe one of those will appeal to you a little bit more and you can start with that, because there are series by him that are a lot shorter than this giant one. So yes, but this is one of my favourite fantasies, so of course it had to be in this video. Next I have The Blade Itself, which is by Joe Abercrombie. This is book 1 in the First Law series, and I read this last year I believe and I really enjoyed it. This series is a little bit different because this one focuses on a barbarian who is called Logan Ninefingers. He is quite an interesting character and he's journeying through this world for most of the story, and then he reaches and meets up with some of the other characters, which was quite interesting to see. His culture and background was very different to a lot of things I've read about, because I've never really read about barbarians before this and I really enjoyed it. Then we have Jezal, who is he's a bit of a poser. He's a little bit of a poser. He likes to show off in fencing, he likes to kind of get all the girls. He's very much a ladies' man and he just kind of likes to have everything his way. But he kind of gets thrown into something a lot bigger than he could have anticipated. War is brewing and all sorts of things are happening to lead up to war coming, and definitely he has to grow as a person and he has to become bigger and better than just thinking about his own needs and his own thoughts. So it's very interesting to watch him grow as a character. And then the other main character in this is called Locke, and he works for the government. He is a kind of torturer. He essentially gets confessions from people in whatever way is necessary to get the confession. He seems like quite a nasty guy, but he's actually quite genuine and he does care about the world and he does really want it to be the best that it can. He uproots something very suspicious and he doesn't really know what he's got himself into, but it kind of spells trouble from then on. And on the whole, this was a really, really good series, so definitely try checking this one out. If you haven't already read any of Joe Abercrombie's books, then I would highly recommend him. He is a really, really good author, so definitely I'm going to be carrying on with this series. At the moment, this is the only one in the series that I have read, but I do intend to read the next one and the final one very, very soon if I can. So definitely let me know if you guys have read this or if you've read any of the books that I'm going to show you, because I'm really interested to hear your thoughts. Next, I have a very, very classic fantasy. This is book 1 in the Wheel of Time series by Robert Jordan, and this is The Eye of the World. As you can see, my copy is very, very battered. I got it secondhand, so it was already a little bit battered once I started it, but now it's quite battered, poor thing, because they're not very sturdy, these books. I have sellotaped it up on the front cover. Anyway, on the whole, the story is very interesting. This story and this whole series, which is 14 books long, is probably one of the most well-known and well-recognised and realised worlds and fantasy stories that there is. It's a huge, huge undertaking. All of the books are around 800, 900 or 1,000 pages. They're really, really, really long, even though they are small. The writing is quite small as well, the margins are quite small too. So if you're going to start this series, I admire you, because it is a huge, huge undertaking. This one is absolutely insane. But if you do feel like starting this series, it is a very interesting series. It's kind of based on the idea of light and darkness. Those are the main principles of this series. So in this story we follow 3 young farm boys. There is Rand al'Thor, who is the main character. He lived on a farm with his father called Tam, and then we have Matt, who is one of his best friends, and Perrin, who is one of the other friends that they have in their village. He is a blacksmith, and together they kind of end up getting mixed up in a huge giant web of goodness knows what. All sorts of terrible things start happening in their world. Their village gets invaded and everything kind of starts going absolutely wrong, and the whole world seems to be going into uproar. There are crazy things happening all across the world and people are getting a little bit scared. People think that the shadow is coming back and everything's starting to go wrong, and they kind of get mixed up in the whole of this, and they get told by Aes Sedai, who is essentially the sorceresses of this world. They are called Aes Sedai. They get told by an Aes Sedai that they are somehow involved in this and they have to come with her, and they have to go on a big journey across the world to go to the home of the Aes Sedai and find out if they can help stop this madness that is taking over the world and try and be the light to beat the darkness, essentially. So it's a really interesting book. It's a really, really good series, but it is huge and the pacing is quite slow. So this is really a big undertaking and it will be a long time before you get into some action. There are scenes that are really, really fast-paced and really exciting, but there are equally scenes that are very, very slow and maybe a little bit too much detail in places. Also, the names of the characters in this are absolutely very confusing, and as you go through the series further on, it gets more confusing because more and more and more and more characters keep joining in and you get confused easily. So again, this is definitely not to be undertaken lightly. It is a very huge series and it is a very detailed one. I would recommend it because I would say that if you do like massive fantasy stories, then this is a really, really good one, and it is highly, highly recognised in the fantasy world. So it's definitely worth reading and I would highly recommend it. The next series that I have is a lot more light-hearted than many of the other series, and this is Steelheart by Brandon Sanderson again. This series is essentially about anti-heroes. They are in a world where superheroes have kind of become quite normal. A lot of people have superpowers and a lot of people can do all sorts of very, very cool and exciting things, but they don't tend to use their powers for good. Superpowers have kind of been taken for granted and people have taken over cities and people start ruling all of the people without superpowers by being evil and locking people away and enforcing rules with their superpowers, and they basically become absolutely horrible. So the superheroes kind of become anti-heroes and they're not very nice, they're quite nasty. So they are nicknamed the Epics, and we follow the story of David, who is not an epic. He does not have superpowers, but he is on the trail of the Reckoners. The Reckoners are essentially a group of people who are fighting against the Epics. Even though they don't have superpowers themselves, they are fighting against the Epics in every way, shape and form that they can think of, and this is just a really, really fun series. A really light-hearted, very, very enjoyable and very action-packed series. It's quite a short book, it's not a big one for a fantasy, but I highly, highly recommend this series because it is really, really fun. And the characters are very entertaining, the superpowers are very ingenious and exciting, and the whole premise is just very, very fun on the whole. So if you want a more light-hearted and exciting story, then this is definitely a good one. Also, to get you into Brandon Sanderson, this would be a good one to start with as well, because this is not that long and it's quite exciting and fun. So I would definitely recommend this series. Next, of course, I can't forget Harry Potter, because Harry Potter was one of those series that I grew up with throughout my childhood. I have never actually read any of the Harry Potter books because I had the Harry Potter tapes. I'm sure many of you have seen on my bookshelf when I filmed before. I do have the Harry Potter tapes on top of where the Harry Potter books are, but I have read the 7th one because I didn't have the tape of that and I couldn't borrow it from the library. So that's the only one I have actually physically read myself, but I love them. I love these books. They are highly enjoyable. They are about a boy wizard named Harry. He doesn't know he's a wizard, but he's actually a very, very famous one because at birth he defeated the Lord Voldemort, who is the bad guy in the world, and no one really knows how. No one really understands how he defeated him when he was a little baby. But it's all about his escapades against Lord Voldemort, and as the stories go on they get bigger because this one is quite short, and there are so many charming things, so many really, really lovely things in this world and in this series. So if you have not read this, which I'm sure nearly all of you have, but if you haven't, then definitely give it a try because I'm sure you will enjoy it. And if you don't like reading the books, then definitely check out the Stephen Fry tapes because they are absolutely wonderful, and Stephen Fry really manages to bring the characters to life, and he really, really got me into this series. So definitely worth checking out. Also, the books contain quite a lot of stuff that the films do have to miss out. So if you've only seen the films, I would definitely say it is worth reading the books because they are absolutely amazing and so much fun, and you'll learn so much more about the world of Harry Potter. I myself am planning to reread this series, or read it for the first time, as soon as I get the second one in this edition, which I don't have yet and I can't find anywhere. So if you do know where to get the second one in this series in the hardback UK adult edition, let me know because I am looking and I really want it. Next, I have The Name of the Wind. This is by Patrick Rothfuss, and this is the first one in a 3-book series. The third book is not out yet, but is due to come out in the next year or so, I believe. And this is the first one. The second one is The Wise Man's Fear, which I do own but I haven't read yet. So why is this in my top 10 if I haven't even read the next one? Because it's amazing. This is a 5-star book in every sense of the word. It's absolutely amazing. The story is so fun, very captivating, it's very exciting and very enjoyable. This is the story of Kvothe. Kvothe is essentially known as the world's greatest hero. He's renowned for doing all sorts of amazing things and having had a very, very exciting and vibrant and brilliant life doing all sorts of different things around the world, and people know him as this big hero. However, at the moment that we meet him, right at the beginning, he is in hiding in a pub just as a chronicler comes across him, which is someone who writes down epic stories, and the chronicler basically finds out that he is hiding away in this pub and asks him to recount his life story to him, which Kavoth, after quite a while of persuasion, does eventually agree to, and we kind of see his life in the way that it actually was, not in the way that he is remembered, in the way that people see him, but in the way that it actually truly happened. And we follow him throughout his life, from when he was a tiny child all the way up to how he gets in the pub. I'm assuming, obviously that hasn't happened yet because there are 2 more books in the series, but we follow him throughout his life and we see all sorts of fantastic, wonderful things and places that he's been to and done, and it's just a really, really, really well written book. The story is really good and the character development in this story is just truly astounding. It is so different to every other fantasy book that I've read, and I would highly recommend this series to you. If you have never seen it or heard of it, definitely pick it up because it is absolutely wonderful. Again, they're very long books and the writing is absolutely tiny, but it is highly worth it, and the story is just so wonderful that you're missing out if you don't read this. So go and pick this one up as well. Next, I have The Lies of Locke Lamora. This is book 1 in the Gentleman Bastards series by Scott Lynch, and I really enjoyed this. This is essentially the story of thieves. It's about a thief guild called the Gentleman Bastards, and one of our thieves in that guild is called Locke Lamora, and we follow his story and his adventures, and it's all about the way that he kind of comes into the world an unknown orphan. We don't really know much about him, but then he gets taken in by a man named Chains, and he gets taught all sorts of very interesting things, such as how to pronounce his words, how to do different accents, to do different languages, how to eat properly, how to fence and duel and work on farms. Basically anything and everything he could ever need to pull off a big deception is taught to him whilst he lives at Chains' house, and he therefore ends up someone who is very renowned, and he is absolutely wonderful as a character. He's very witty, very funny, and it's very gritty, this story. It's dark in some places, but it's also hilarious in others, so it's a good balance between all of those emotions. I would highly recommend this series. I would think that if you like thieving, or if you like bands of guilds and things like that, then it's definitely worth reading. It's really fun, very enjoyable, and the writing is absolutely amazing. I have just finished book 3 in the series and I really enjoyed them all, so I would highly recommend all of these to you guys. This one and the second one especially, because those 2 are wonderful, and I think that you guys will love them. I am sure if you like fantasy, then you should definitely pick up some of Scott Lynch's work because it's very good, and he is again a very recognised fantasy author now, and he's making more of a name for himself in the fantasy world, so definitely worth checking out. Next, I have another kind of classic in the fantasy genre, and this is George R.R. Martin, A Game of Thrones, book 1 in the Song of Ice and Fire series, and this is an absolutely phenomenal series. This is high fantasy, epic fantasy, and it's basically a big war over the throne. This throne that you can see here is called the Iron Throne, and this whole book and this whole series is essentially a massive war over who should claim the throne and who should rule over these cities. It's a really fun story. There are so many very exciting characters and very individual characters who are very memorable, such as Tyrion Lannister, who is a dwarf. He's very witty, very funny, and very entertaining. We have the Starks, who live up in the north, and they're very close-knit family, very loyal to one another, very kind-hearted. We have the Lannisters, who are rather nasty characters, quite evil, quite horrible. We don't really want to get on the bad side of them. We have Daenerys, who is on a different continent, kind of. She's in a different land, she's across the sea from all of them. And we have all sorts of different colourful characters and just so much fun reading this story. I would highly recommend this. If you've never heard of it, you must have been living under a rock. It's recently been made into a TV series in the last few years. I think they're up to season 4 now, and it's just such a wonderful story. If you don't want to read the books, then definitely watch the TV series, because the TV series is really good. It doesn't quite follow the storyline in some places, but it is still absolutely a wonderful TV series, and I would highly recommend it. These books are phenomenal. This is what really got me into kind of the high fantasy genre, so I would definitely recommend them. Pick them up because they're really good. I know that they're long. I know that all of the books that I'm showing you guys are quite long, but fantasy it has to be long to get really interesting, I think, and I love just falling into a really, really detailed and exciting and gritty and fun world, and these books all have that in some element and some way, so it's definitely worth diving into and committing to. Even though they're really, really long, I would still highly, highly, highly recommend them. Next, I have The Painted Man by Peter V. Brett. This is a less well-known series, it seems. I haven't heard very many people talk about this, but I have been reading this for quite a while, this series, and I've absolutely loved it. I would highly, highly recommend this series to you guys. It's one of my favourites, and Peter V. Brett is, again, an absolutely phenomenal writer. I would highly recommend his stories. This is the story of a world where at night these kind of demons come up from the ground. They're all sorts of different demons. You get rock demons, you get swamp demons, you just get any type and every type of demon. They're all to do with different elements, and they're very, very interesting. They kind of come up at night, and a lot of people are very, very scared of these demons. They won't go out at night. They put wards of different shapes and patterns on their windows and doors to keep out the demons, and it's a very, very magic based story, so I really enjoyed that aspect. A lot of people are very, very scared of the demons, and they refuse to go out at night, and they refuse to leave their homes, but so many more people are being taken that it kind of becomes impossible to continue their existence like this. And so the Painted Man, our hero, comes along, and he basically has to teach them how to defend themselves and how to go out into the night without fear and fight against the demons and take back their land and claim back what is theirs, because they should not have to hide every night from the demons. They should be able to go out at night and not fear death. It was a really, really good read, and I would highly, highly recommend this series. It's a very, very entertaining one, very, very fun, and the land and the cultures that they talk about are very interesting and very different. So again, highly, highly worth reading, highly worth picking up, and I would highly recommend it. I would definitely say that this is one of my favourite series, one of my more favourite out of all of the ones I'm showing you. So yeah, I have like a little soft spot in my heart for this series, and it's really, really fun. And the final book that I'm going to show you guys today is The Final Empire, which is by Brandon Sanderson, and this is book 1 in the Mistborn trilogy. This is set in a world where there is a Lord Ruler who essentially rules over everything. He's a very, very evil kind of guy. He doesn't like things to go wrong, and he's very against the Scar. The Scar are essentially the slave population. And he is very evil, he's very nasty, and has been for the past 1,000 years that he's been ruling them. So Kelsier, who is our main character, comes into the story, and he basically wants to defeat the Lord Ruler. And he gathers a group of different people together who all have different magical powers. Vin is also one of our main characters. She comes into it and she is a street rat. She lives off the street and she doesn't know that she has magical powers, but as soon as Kelsier recruits her, she finds out that in fact she does, and she is a Mistborn, which is a very powerful magical person in this world who has access to all of the different metals. Metals are a very, very powerful source of magic in this world. If you swallow a vial of metal, then you may have different powers. Allomancy is the name of this metal drinking powerful kind of thing, and different metals give you different powers. So we have steel that pushes on nearby metals, and iron that pulls on nearby metals, tin that enhances your senses, and pewter which enhances your physical abilities, brass that soothes emotions, and zinc which riots emotions, and copper that hides allomancy, and bronze that reveals allomancy. So all of these metals have all their own unique properties, so it's a really interesting world. The magical system is brilliant. The whole of the series is absolutely phenomenal. I would highly recommend this. Like all of the others, it is a well worthwhile read, and I would definitely say that this is one of my favourite Brandon Sanderson series, so it's highly recommended, highly recognised as well. And this is basically what got him to his status that he now is of a wonderful fantasy writer. So definitely check this one out, guys. It is absolutely amazing, and the characters in the world are very, very interesting and different to everything else I've ever read. So these are all of the books I just showed you guys. I would highly recommend all of them. They're all amazing in their own way. Definitely let me know down below if you guys have read any, or if you have any recommendations for me that aren't in this list. And I thank you all for watching, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye! Me and you gonna have a little chat.